Alright everyone, just a quick announcement before I get into this video. At 5 p.m. Eastern today, it's planned that I'm going to be chatting with Baked Alaska, of course, in the wake of being banned off basically every platform. I figured it'd be a good idea to let him air his grievances and sort of chat about things. One thing that content creators at this point I think probably should begin doing is platforming one another when another person has been screwed over. You can still talk to them. They can't ban you from talking to someone just because that other person isn't allowed to do whatever. So, it's all well and good. Now, but let's get into the bulk of the video here, which is about the Trump wall, actually. Trump is planning to go down and look at the various prototypes that have been sort of made. Now, if you look, some people were worried early on. That is, people, maybe the half-hearted Trump supporters, the softer supporters. They're like, oh, yeah, I'd like to see a wall, but maybe he's going to half-ass it and it'll just be a fence or something. That was, I don't think, ever really going to happen because it's not in Trump's sort of MO to build things in a half-assed manner. No, his MO is, hey, I gilded everything in gold. I use a golden toilet and I have marble floors. There's actually a thing, it was posted the other day about sort of the extravagant design elements that Trump tends to prefer, how it's beginning to bleed out into maybe lamestream middle American culture, which I don't think that's necessarily the greatest thing people should emulate about Trump, because, of course, run yourself into debt. Don't do that. Trump would probably warn you not to. Anyway. As far as the wall goes, all of the prototypes, as far as I know, are fairly sophisticated. Now, there is a range involved. Some of them are more fortress-looking. Some of them are more, drab and boring, to tell the truth. Some of them have interesting fixtures. For instance, the concept of having a rail on top of a wall. The concept of having advertising billboards. I, of course, would oppose that. By the way, did you know Vermont banned billboards? So actually, like businesses, if they're putting a sign out front, there are only certain dimensions and stuff that they can actually use. Generally, though, it makes it more scenic. It's like great, as opposed to maybe some of our neighboring states that have billboards. And you're driving along an otherwise scenic road, and it's sort of weird to see a billboard rise up in between a bunch of pine trees. But there are also, one of them is, I believe, a solar wall. Some of them are more standalone. Some have like walkways, roofing, interesting things like that. My own personal preference would be if it can be used for energy production at all. That would be great. The southern states, if you're subsidizing, giving them basically free energy as the result of doing this, I think that would help bring them on board. It would help to stymie maybe some of the cries of people in maybe the more center left if they consider environmentalism and energy more important than immigration at large. Maybe they're like, well, it could be worse. Trump's putting up all this green energy. It's like, as much as all of China's using, it could be pretty good. You'd probably power millions and millions of homes from just this, one long, more or less continuous, but ultimately very thin wall. You could easily do so. The main thing, though, is that the barrier is meant to keep things out that you don't want in the country, namely people who haven't filed the paperwork and are not actually legally entitled to be here at all. Now, this comes at the same time as the DACA problem for Trump regarding SCOTUS, but I don't see it as a problem, and I'm going to do a separate video on that and explain why. This is, by the way, the sort of Great Wall of Trump, the MAGA wall, is one of his main campaign promises. Fulfilling this, or at least the planning is already in the end stages, apparently. The basis of basic fundraising has already been obtained. He's already gotten the preliminary stage more or less out of the way in his first year in office. That's pretty good, and I would say not much more is required in his entire first term to really say, well, it's a campaign promise that I fulfilled. He never said that the wall would be instantly built. Like, oh yeah, day one, we're going to put up an enormous junk bay. It's going to look like a fallout wall, and we're just going to draft 100 million people to come take all their shit and pile it into a wall and like cement it together with Elmer's glue or something. He never said that that was going to happen. Although it would be interesting. It would be interesting to emulate Fallout, make a wall like that. That would be pretty cool. Yeah, I could go for that. It'd be cheaper probably too. You'd say, hey, you got this used storage 10 years ago that you filled up. You don't want it? Okay, we'll just dump it at the border and we'll hire artists, modern artists to nail it together into art forms. That would be funny. But basically, it's a main campaign promise. For Trump, what were the big ones that he campaigned on? Number one, I think, of all was really the wall. Number two was immigration reform separate from that in general. Number three was taxes. And number four is basically a combination of jobs in the economy loosely tied with taxes. He's already fulfilled the tax side. He's already begun to fulfill the latter economic end, which is he's reducing the regulatory burden. Wages have begun to rise. Jobs have begun to come back in some of those more blighted communities. He's doing a good job on both of those measures, and insofar as immigration reform in general, other than the wall, there's not a whole lot he's actually physically capable of doing until the Democrats come and talk with him about DACA as well. Now then, because I'm going to speak about that separately, I won't bring it up beyond, the most minor details here now. Essentially, the Supreme Court doesn't want to have to weigh in on the case and is, I think, hoping the lower court sides with Trump. Because then, in the future, the Supreme Court can revise things if it becomes an issue again. By the way, he can't unilaterally do anything about sanctuary cities. But what you've seen with this mayor, which city was it? I can't even remember which city, 'cause it's like inconsequential. One of these sanctuary cities mayors came out and apparently told the public about an impending ICE raid within the confines of the city, potentially endangering the lives of immigration officials, potentially endangering the lives of the entire community. And then said, well, I don't regret it, I have a moral responsibility. Well, no, you don't, but the thing is, if you look at this, the average American's reaction to that is not going to be the same as the reaction of a far-left sanctuary city dwelling American. They may have no problem with this. Most of the rest of America, including all the business Democrats, I think see it as a problem that there are people who are saying, oh, fuck the law, basically. And they're doing it in a political manner. Look, if a group of private citizens created like a whack-ass underground railroad style thing for illegals to shuttle them from place to place without them getting caught, I wouldn't agree with it necessarily. It's still breaching the law, but they're private individuals. They're going down like the hippie route. Instead, what we see are a bunch of friggin' career politicians, a bunch of corrupt shysters are the ones that are pretending to care about immigration. They don't care about the immigrants beyond using them as a political issue. That's really, they don't care. If they cared about the immigrants, they certainly wouldn't come and say, oh yeah, there's going to be an ICE raid here. So instead of deportation, maybe someone gets ambushed. Maybe it turns into a riot. Maybe our city looks so shitty that a bunch of people boycott it and we lose a bunch of money. Good luck paying now for paying for those individuals who can't even legally work on a federal level. It's going to be a little bit of a problem, I think. But the Great Wall of Trump, the prototypes are apparently done. The first installation of funding to plan and design is already, he got that within, I think, the first few weeks he was in office, didn't he? It was certainly very, very early on. He'd barely taken the oath of office. He already got that. He'll continue to get more. The thing is, the Democrats, at a maximum, can maintain most of DACA. That is the maximum upper limit of what they're capable of achieving. In order to even come close to achieving that, they have to give Trump his wall funding. They probably have to give him a sanctuary city crackdown, although he may go the judicial route on that and totally circumvent them. Eventually, the Ninth Circuit and the Democrats in Congress are going to have to buckle down and deal with the fact that the president is no longer an open borders globalist aficionado. They're going to have to deal with that fact. They're not going to be able to stop him forever. Legal cases, eventually he uses the Supreme Court, just lays waste to his enemies. They're desperately trying to show restraint, and I support that, and not do so because then they could accidentally give future executive officials too much power, I think. I think that's what's in their minds. Keep in mind it's a conservative court that refused to hear the case. They want the lower court to, you take care of it. You give Trump his ability to do these things, to disembowel DACA and use it as leverage, basically. We don't want to have to touch the case because we don't want to set a future precedent at the highest level that becomes much harder to reverse, much harder to challenge. I think that's what they were thinking, and I agree with them. But the Trump wall is one of the most important. It's the most visible. It's the most visible and talked about campaign promise that he made. He's already passed the first hurdle, which is planning and prototyping. Now it's basically, oh, this is the kind of wall I want. Take it before Congress. The Republicans are already aboard. He either invokes the nuclear option, which may not be the best thing to do, or he potentially wines and dines just enough centrist Democrats, gets them on board to fund the rest of the wall. If he has to give them part of DACA to do that, nobody's really going to care. Okay, military veterans will get conditional residency. It's a small price to pay, I think, for permanently fixing the border problem. I think a lot of Republicans will see it that way. There are a few purists out there who say, no, Trump should get 100% of what he campaigned on and then some, deport everyone, and nobody else gets anything. That's not going to happen. It's not the way politics works. That's the land of utopian nonsense. It's the land of saying, well, it's pragmatic because of some ethnic reason, but it's not pragmatic. It would be destabilizing to attempt to do so, and you wouldn't get anywhere. It would not work. Indeed, that's not the way that negotiating works. Trump is the negotiating money president. That's basically what he is. He's almost a reverse Jimmy Carter in that sense, despite the fact that he has some of the same problems as far as public image goes. Mainly, he doesn't get along well with the media, so they constantly defame him. But he gets his wall, I predict. I think he gets his wall at the very least, and that is an important step in securing our border. That, and he's already gotten the ICE agents and the increased spending and stuff. Now, you can say what you will about those things. That's about all. Peace out.